It starts with understanding what the client wants and helping them get their feet back on earth if they're a little unaligned with reality. You can put two and two together and be like, hey, is this person really getting a good investment on their time? The reality is what we're doing is we're utilizing pretty much all of the tools that exist in the recruitment world.
Welcome to The Growth Switch, the podcast where we explore the strategies, struggles, and breakthroughs of bold business leaders. I'm your host, Jules Fox, growth strategist and lead content creator at Aries Media. I'm here to uncover how today's top brands are scaling, overcoming challenges, and unlocking sustainable success. Now, for those of you just tuning in, Aries Media helps grow successful brands like yours with comprehensive hands-on support for sales, business development, and performance marketing. Go ahead and drop growth into the comments if you want to learn how to do that. Now, today, I am fortunate enough to have Greg Thorpe on The Growth Switch. He's the Vice President of Client Engagement at WorkRocket, where he's in charge of driving sales and matching top-tier talent with the best companies in manufacturing, heavy equipment, and trucking. Greg, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Jules.
Hey, so nice to have you. So, I would love to know a little bit more about your backstory. Where did you come from? How did you get into this industry?
Yeah, I graduated from a small state school in the middle of Virginia and didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I'd be a rock star. And so I needed to pay, bills. And I was always naturally good with sales. And so I just applied to some staffing firms. And one of them was called the Richmond Group USA, which is our parent company. At the time, they were starting up a recruitment process outsourcing business called WorkRocket. They're looking for people as it's sort of almost an experiment to see if it would work. And it was a very good decision on my part, looking back 12 years later, where we've grown the business significantly and it's really changed my life in a way that I'd never thought possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So you went from dreaming of being a rock star to WorkRocket star, which is fine because it is a very much a sales job. Recruiting is sales on both ends. You're selling to two parties. You're selling to the companies who need quality employees, but you're also selling the promise of something better to people who are interested in working with these companies and then making that match. Tell me a little bit more about that process.
It starts with understanding what the client wants and helping them get their feet back on earth if they're a little unaligned with reality. But the bottom line is you talk to them, you understand not just who they're looking for, but why somebody with that background would quit their job to come work for them. Because typically the people that they want to recruit are already employed. It's not someone sitting on the couch. It's an audience of people who are working elsewhere who would really only consider making a change if they were contacted directly or if they're in a situation where they're pretty severely unhappy. In which case, they're going to be applying everywhere and you typically don't need outside assistance to find that person.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that makes a lot of sense. So, to ask the obvious question, what is it that does draw those people who are either happily employed or unhappily employed, already have a job, they have gainful employment? What is going to draw them elsewhere to find a better opportunity or a bigger opportunity? What does that draw?
Well, it depends on the person, but it typically comes down to a few buckets depending on the individual. And the obvious one is, well, more money, right? And depending on where somebody is in their career, that's a perfectly valid reason. There are other things, particularly when we talk about manufacturing. You could have a machinist who's making parts or components that would be put into maybe the building products industry. And they're more aligned with wanting to make an impact on their world. Maybe they want to feel better about what they're making day to day, that it matters more. So they would be willing to take a lateral move in pay to make flight critical components for attack helicopters that defend the country. Yeah. There's one example. Others could be, hey, I'm sick of working second shift. I want to work first shift, or I want to cut my commute from 30 minutes to 15. So it doesn't have to be this big, massive sales pitch to get somebody to change. More so, it's about actually having a reasonable conversation with another human being, because this change is scary, right? You're going to leave your job where there's comfort to try something new. That's a big decision for anybody. Mm-hmm. And so part of the skill in being in the recruitment world is alleviating the candidate of that concern.
Yeah. Now, that brings up a really good point. This is a very human activity, and more our world is being taken over and dominated by AI, algorithms, algorithmic jobs. I see on LinkedIn all the time about how Some companies are just, you show up and there's an AI asking you questions, and you've shown up and you're being interviewed by a robot, essentially. Um, so it sounds like there's a very human element to what you do, which is connecting real humans with real opportunities. Why don't you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've probably seen in the news there's a related lawsuit, Mobley versus Workday, which is about AI bias and collective action. Derek Mobley was over 40, disabled. He was rejected from over 100 jobs using Workday's AI-powered applicant recommendation system. And he claims the system discriminated based on age, race, and disability. I don't think Workday on purpose meant to do that. It's
Yeah.
honest mistake, right? But hey, that's AI for you.
Yeah.
Making mistakes in recruiting, it's just not there yet. If you want to get expert help in recruitment, you need human experts, and this is a field that I think is not going to be replaced by AI in the least in the next decade or two as a result. I mean, you're already seeing some major pushback. Um, the other piece about human beings when it comes to not just recruitment, but recruitment advertising in particular, is humans are still better at being creative and thinking critically in pretty unique human-based circumstances. For example, if I've got a manufacturer who's in the middle of nowhere in Iowa, and they're trying to find an industrial maintenance technician who's got the hydraulic, pneumatic, and electrical experience that can hit the ground running. And that person doesn't exist. They flat out do not live in the town. They're not there. Well,
Yeah.
how do you convince that person who's working 3 hours away, 8 hours away, to quit their job, move their family, and come to the area? Well, for one of our clients, it was as simple as hiring us, and we put a big buck 12-pointer on an ad on Facebook and all over social media and on everything that we did. And we said, do you like hunting? Do you want to come to one of the best hunting towns in the area? Are you a mechanic? And we helped them fill the position in less than 30 days.
Smart.
And it was that critical thing. It's like, how do we help them with this? You can't plug that into Chat GPT and have them have AI execute that strategy completely.
No.
That said, it's a great tool. I think people who can use it are going to outperform people who can't, but you can't rely on it solely.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like what you guys did is you sell the lifestyle to sell the job, you know? So I know that you've talked a lot about how this is a booming business right now. What WorkRocket does and where they place in manufacturing and heavy equipment and trucking, these are good paying jobs. Clearly you can get a lot of value for these people. So who are these jobs the right fit for? Like, who would be the best candidates to take on jobs like this?
Well, if you're asking why get into it from the start, like for young people, right?
Mhm.
The classic example is the comparison to college, right? So obviously lower debt, significantly
Mhm.
less debt to get into the trades versus a 4-year degree.
Mhm.
The other thing is the earning potential is very undersold, I think, as a culture in the US. We don't talk enough about how you can go to a trade school, be out of debt within a year or two, and start making 80 to 100 grand as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old, and build on that from there. It can be a vehicle to fuel other investments, other ways to make money. Say you want to get into property management and you want to buy some properties. Well, you're going to lose a lot of money at paying for tradesmen to help you fix your stuff. However, if you yourself are a tradesman, let's say you're a plumber or an HVAC tech or an electrician, now you're
Yeah.
making money in a couple ways, aren't you? You're making money from your day job. You can buy a property and then you don't have to outsource fixing it up. There's just there's so much upside to it, where there's so much demand for services in this field that in addition to, hey, you're coming out of uh, of a trade school or right out of high school with no debt and starting to make a good living as a young person, but we're talking about AI, until the robots can go into the crawl space, identify a leak and fix it, we're going to need a human being going to do that. And so those jobs are not going away. And there's not enough people who want to do them. So because of the shortage of skilled workers and as more and more retire, you've got your whole life ahead of you to be a top earner and not really have to struggle for business.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is a big point that a lot of people don't talk about, that a lot of people miss, you know? So what about for people who have been working in the trades for some time? What kind of opportunities are there for them to either do upskilling or to maybe take some of those lateral moves that you were talking about to get into a similar but slightly different industries? What do you offer people like those who are looking to expand or get into new fields?
If you're an experienced machinist, welder, industrial maintenance tech, electrician, HVAC tech, plumber, quality inspector, millwright, you can go work anywhere you want as long as you can present well and you're reliable. If you have the actual skills, you can go work and you're good at it. You can go work anywhere you want.
Yeah.
The ball is in their court. They have the leverage. So
Yeah.
what employers need to be doing is recognizing the talent that they have and making sure that they're continually offering raises based on performance. And you're seeing a lot of this where a tradesman, let's say an electrician who's working at a manufacturer making 35 an hour, he
Yeah.
sees an ad for 45 an hour. He doesn't really want to leave his company, but he wants to raise. Well, getting a $10 an hour raise, typically a difficult thing to accomplish. But what if that guy goes in that interview, gets the offer, and then goes back to his employer and say, I've got an offer in hand. Well, now
Yeah.
it's a lot more likely that you get that, what we would call a counter offer,
Mm-hmm.
where you don't take the existing offer on the table from the new employer and you stay with your old employer and you get the raise as a result. Unfortunately, that's what they've resulted. That's what they're doing. That's what they've resorted to do, because that's the faster way to get the raise than just the employer noticing the market. And so part of the value in working with an agency like WorkRocket, we can help ground our clients in reality so
Mm-hmm.
that they make it's not just smart decisions to keep people, but it's a financially smart decision. It's much more expensive to replace that person than it is to
Yes.
retain.
Yeah, absolutely. So what
So
are some of the top mistakes that you see these companies making, that they are continuing to lose some of their top employees? How can you help them to keep these employees for longer?
I think the biggest thing is engagement. You can't be, if you're the leadership group or you're the owner of a small business, you can't be in your ivory tower.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be talking to folks. You've got to understand what they like and don't like about working with you or working for you, and identify, hey, what areas could we actually change on versus what are things that are just the nature of the business and will never change, and set expectations realistically. There's a lot of things employers could do to incentivize people to stay, but at the end of the day, you should treat your employees like investors. They're investing their time and they're expecting a return proportionate with the time invested. And so if you think about it from that perspective and you have a reasonable head on your shoulders, which most business owners do, and be pretty
Yeah.
smart, you can put two and two together and be like, hey, is this person really getting a good investment on their time? And if you can't answer that honestly with yes, you should change something versus role, whether it's comp or something, so
Yeah.
that realistically you increase the likelihood of that person staying.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So how do people best connect with you? How do they find you? How do people who want to be employed find you? How do employers who need top talent find you?
Yeah, employers tend to go to workrocket.com and take the 20 seconds to put their name and information in, and they get a call from us the same or the next day. We'll consult with them, understand the problem they need to solve, and customize a solution. We also
Okay.
have several out of the box services that are very inexpensive, 5 to 10 times less expensive than using a traditional recruitment agency.
Mm-hmm.
And the feedback is that the results are the same, if not better. Retention is better. And for the cost savings, comparatively speaking, it tends to be a no-brainer once they actually figure out what we do. But we don't have a direct competitor out there to compare this to. There's nothing really else in the marketplace that's solving the problem we're solving at this price point.
Yeah. Are you allowed to get into that, or is that like insider info that a person would need to hop on a meeting to chat with you about?
In terms of the actual service offerings and what they cost,
Oh, you don't have to get into prices. I just meant what the service offering is.
yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, yeah, they got to talk to us. It is pretty unique, and we are very cautious of putting our playbook out there for the world to see it. The reality is, what we're doing is we're utilizing pretty much all of the tools that exist in the recruitment world that a top 1% agency recruiter would utilize to generate qualified candidates for their customer.
Yeah.
The tools themselves are not something we've invented or created.
Mm-hmm.
Just like anybody can go to a hardware store and buy a bunch of power tools, but just because you have power tools doesn't mean you can build a deck. What you're hiring is the master craftsman in the recruitment world when you hire us. You're
Yeah.
hiring people who are experts and who are growing with the changes in the landscape of recruiting year after year.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that people will recognize that value. So for all of the listeners, all the viewers of this podcast, you can actually look right below into the show notes. And in a single click, you will be able to better connect with Greg and with WorkRocket. Greg, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your expertise.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.